Hello.
How you doing?
Good. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Emily should be dialing in. She's at her work, so I think she's going to dial in or she might come in on her phone. I'm not sure.
Sure.
Ah,
How was it this past week?
good. Good. I take her walking twice a day.
Okay.
She's done very well. She needs very little correction when we walk. So she's coming along that way very nicely.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I know Emily had a question, so I'm just going to answer it.
Sure.
And relay the info. So, Penny has, as you know, she's got a prong collar, which we don't use that much anymore because she's really response to the e-collar.
Correct.
And so when we go for a walk, when she's not muzzled, which is most of the times, like in her neighborhood, she's fine.
Sure.
And, so she's got a flat collar on.
Uh-huh.
But Emily was asking, is that the ideal collar for her, or should she have the harness thing that goes around her, her chest and everything?
The harness gives you the least amount of control. It actually puts Penny more so in control, and I think Emily just joined in here.
I see her. Hey, are you muted, Em? Yep. Technology.
Yeah.
Are you driving down the road and zooming? That's like a class 4, whatever you call a misdemeanor. End up in jail. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I forgot how to read lips. I can't hear you. All right.
So go ahead, Ed. So
that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me that she cannot. That we lose control because it's all here and it's not. This when she gets lifted here, it probably doesn't make her feel all that uncomfortable. When she gets pressure here, it makes her feel uncomfortable and gets her attention.
Correct. And harnesses actually promote. If I have a dog that's struggling with reactivity, the harness intensifies the reactivity. So dogs have this thing called opposition reflex. I mean, technically humans do too. So whenever we feel pressure, we go against it. So, most people, when their dog pulls, they'll pull back. And on a harness, it puts all the pressure on the chest, and the dog has a lot of leverage over the human because they're lower to the ground, and plus they're putting their chest behind the harness, which is where the power is. And it creates agitation, and I've had plenty of clients whose puppies were friendly, and they put them on harnesses because they don't want any pressure on the throat, which I get. But what happens over time is the puppy, most puppies are very curious and want to go up to everything and everyone, and they keep pulling their puppy back, to avoid them from bothering anybody, and it creates this agitation. And over the course of time, what was curiosity becomes frustration, becomes agitation, becomes aggression. And I did protection training years and years ago with my mentor, and that's what we use. We use a harness on a dog to make them more pissed off, because we wanted to create the behavior and then control it so that we had a protection dog. So a lot of people put their dogs in harnesses. Harnesses are meant for pulling, for one, pulling sleds, pulling tires or whatever if they do any of that kind of competition work. But harnesses are meant for pulling. They're not meant for obedience or casual walking, but, companies and money and, just caring about the dog and not wanting to put pressure on the throat, which, again, I understand. But harnesses are the last thing you want to put on your dog, especially if they have any kind of behavioral issues.
Okay, understood. By the way, are you recording this?
Yes.
Can you record this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I see that Emily's in the car right now, and she might not be able to.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you
now.
Now we do.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yes, Ed, I'm recording.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Did you have any questions, Emily? Edward had just asked about. Do you prefer Ed or Edward?
Ed.
Ed. Okay. Ed had just asked about because Penny's on the prong, And then, should he go off the prong and put her on the e-collar with the harness? And I said just a flat collar and the e-collar is perfectly fine. It's what all our dogs are trained on, unless they need the additional help of the prong collar. But did you have any questions yourself?
Yeah, I guess my question was, what collar do you attach the leash to? The one with the muzzle?
The flat collar.
Okay.
Yeah, the flat collar. We never
I'm
want.
good as long as, she has so much around her throat, I don't know what to attach it to.
So with the muzzle, because there's that loop on the bottom, right, for a collar to go through, your e-collar strap should fit through there. And yeah, so you don't have to, I have a client that bought another collar, so it's collar, muzzle, and then e-collar.
And that's why I'm like,
Yeah. So you should be able to fit your e-collar strap through the muzzle loop there. So then because chances are whenever she's wearing the muzzle, she's going to be wearing her e-collar. And then your flat collar or her flat collar, and that's what you would clip your leash to. If you clip to the e-collar, since it moves and tugs from the leash, it'll inhibit contact. Other questions?
So she's wearing all three?
Well, technically, so if we're going to be addressing certain behaviors, for example, let's say we get to the point of we're going to have someone come over. It would be, a muzzle with the flat collar and then the e-collar. Because we know we're going into a context where we're going to see agitation. So we always want to take that precaution. And as we progress and you get more comfortable and you start making, achieving success, the muzzle, it can work a number of ways. For some of my clients, they'll muzzle the dog for the first 15 minutes, and then once everything's settled and they feel good, they'll remove it. Some of my clients are just completely comfortable and they don't put the muzzle, but they'll have the e-collar on. And other clients will just, as precaution, always have the muzzle on. And maybe a year or two later, they'll finally get comfortable enough that they'll remove it. So there's no real given timeline. It just comes down to how you guys feel about Penny, her behavior, and how much progress she's made.
Okay.
Other questions?
I'm guessing we're going to address this, but, do we want her to be wearing the e-collar inside all the time? I mean, I watched the video, I had a bowl. She got into my empty bowl and was licking it. I can't take it away because she's going to freak out.
Yeah.
So would we use the e-collar in that instance? And so should she be wearing it all the time?
Because I sent you, I think it was a total of 4 videos, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So did you guys get a chance to review the bonker video?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the reason for the 2 approaches here is because you're not always going to have that e-collar available, right? So think of the bonker as a means of correction when you're not set up with the e-collar. And in the beginning, we're trying to, we do controlled organic situations. So what that means is, if Penny has a habit of, if you leave your plate of food, she'll go over and lick at it, and well, I have to leave her alone because I don't have a means of disengaging her, is that I would set that up, where I would leave my plate on the table as temptation, but be already expecting Penny to perform the behavior. And, so if you had your e-collar on, you'd use if she had the e-collar on, you'd use the e-collar. Otherwise, we would use the bonker, okay? So they're both doing the same thing, except the e-collar is, of course, at the press of a button, and we avoid conflict, meaning she doesn't know who it's coming from. The bonker, as you saw, comes from the human, so there can be some kind of conflict there. Now, there's pros and cons to this, right? But what we would do here is I wouldn't wait for Penny to already be engaging with the bowl and then confront her and then correct her, because that's what most people think.
Yeah.
They think, oh, she's at the bowl, I'm going to go tell her no, and go up to her, and then she kicks into resource guarding, and then they think that's when you correct. That's actually not how you want to do it. Okay.
Right. Right, because she's already aroused, and that could backfire.
Correct.
And I think the Gelman, or whatever his name was making the point that you want to put the correction down the instant you see her even going in that direction.
Correct.
So to speak. Like, you just notice a little bit of arousal or a head tilt, or she's checking it out or something. Before she even engages in the behavior, she's going to give you a sign that, hey, I might go check out your bowl.
Correct. So
nip it in the bud.
Exactly. So you're addressing her before that state of arousal, so we shouldn't see the escalation. Okay? Because I like all my resource guarding cases, everybody thinks that we're going to piss the dog off and then we correct them. And I go, no, there's no need to. If you can recognize, like, let's say I put the bowl down and I turn away and then she looks at the bowl, right there, we would correct. It's just her even looking at the bowl. So she's thinking, I can't even think about looking or think about going to that bowl because there's an immediate correction that follows. So what you should see is, if what we repeat this a number of times, is if you leave the bowl down, you'll see her look at it and then immediately move away or disengage from the thought process because she's anticipating that a correction is going to happen like immediately. Okay, that's the easiest and best way to approach it, especially if you're doing bunker, because bunker is confrontational. Now, the pros and cons to the bunker is, if we go back to like when you dropped off Penny and she got out of the leash and the muzzle, right? Is that was confrontational. She came towards me and I corrected her and I reciprocated and I said, you're not going to do that with me, okay? And I disengaged her to the point where she retreated. So she went from the aggressor to the holy crap, I don't want to screw with this guy, I'm going to retreat. And I think you had noted about when you went to put the muzzle on her, how she wasn't bucking around and fighting. Remember, Emily?
Yeah.
Yeah, because...
Yeah, she was fine.
Yeah, because since I corrected her, that correction, it told her, like, cut the crap. So since she settled, and I stopped the aggression and the state of arousal, she was then passive, which then allowed us to do what we wanted to do, which was put the muzzle on her. If you try to muzzle a dog in a state of arousal, you're going to get bucking around and all that stuff. So I always ideally address that first before I go to the next stage. But obviously, it was so early on that we didn't have that available to us. So since you're correcting her yourself, so I handled Penny after you guys dropped her off, and she was fine with me. There was no tension or anything like that, because she sees the situation and she goes, okay, you and me had a disagreement. I aggressed towards you. You aggressed back. You made me retreat and passive, and there was no more tension. Like, I wasn't still pursuing her. I wasn't yelling at her. I just said, nope, not going to happen. And she goes, okay. So then we don't create more issues there. Because what creates issues is when people attach emotion to these corrections. So if I were going after her, screaming and yelling, and continue to go after her even after she retreated, that would have created issues. Does that make sense?
Right. So if you're screaming at the top of your lungs, or something like that, as opposed to just being sort of as calm as you can be in the situation.
Correct.
And not reactive.
Correct. So, because you get what you give. So if someone approaches you, I mean, even with humans, like I remember when I worked at a big chain pet store, they're like, if a client is irate with you, whatever, you always have to be calm, right, and just talk to them calmly or whatever, and eventually you would, that person would calm down because you're not reciprocating, But if you come at them with the intensity, now you got it just escalates, and so eventually it may become physical, right? That's just how it works. So for dogs, to me, dogs are easy to work with because once you shut it down, like, they're not like humans, where humans like are spiteful, or they're, we have revenge, or like we don't let things go. Dogs, as soon as you end you snap the brain out of it. It literally goes from aggression to passive, like that. Okay, but you have to be neutral energy, confident. And you don't. Confidence isn't like being all big and tough. Like when in that setting, I just held my ground. Right? I just got in front of my employees. I stood there in front of her. Whenever she came forward is when I stepped forward and I countered her until she retreated. But then I held still, and I just kept my energy neutral. Right? Had I been screaming or something, she most likely would have re-escalated, and then we would have went right back to square one. Okay. So, and I believe in the video with Gary Wilkes, which is the one where he corrects that puppy, right? He's very neutral, but the correction is very firm. And that's super important.
Yeah.
Because I understand people that we have the psychological kind of barrier, because there's a whole topic of abuse, right? And you're using physicality to correct Penny. And the e-collar is simple because even though it's physical, it removes the connection. It's not you actively bonking or whacking her or whatever, right? But with the bonker, we have that connection, and then a lot of people struggle with that. But dogs bite. Like, this is their language, And, again, going back to that day, like, it was physical. But she stopped and she calmed down and let us take her in. We handled her the rest of the time she was here, no problems, until she spilled food in the kennel. That's a different context. But when done correctly and effectively, it should be that clear. It should be that black and white where it's like, okay, yeah, like there was a moment, we corrected it, she let it go, we're back to harmony or non-tension.
So is the idea to use the e-collar as much as possible, but when we don't have it, to have the bunker available?
Right. So think of the e-collar because there's certain things that, in my opinion, you're not going to be able to match with the bunker. So let's say with Penny, someone knocks on the door and she's without the e-collar, and we need to shut her down. You may need to use the bunker there. But in my brain, I go, well, if she's really too far gone in the intensity, the bonker may not be enough or intense enough to de-escalate her, right? And I could be wrong.
She will come, because I did that once when I was trying to take something away from her, and I threw, it actually looks like a bonker. It's our bolster pillow from our sofa.
Sure.
And she turned around and not only came after me, like chased me down the stairs.
Sure.
Now, if I were you and big and strong and not scared, I would have stood my ground.
I don't know about big and strong.
But I'm not you.
But I'll take it.
I was scared and I ran away like a little girl. Is what I did.
Sure, and that empowered her. Okay.
Yeah.
So, so the way we maneuver around this is, it's like, what I've learned is if you're going to potentially go into that kind of situation, you have to be ready to end it. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's things that we can do, like in case, like I've had clients use rackets to protect them, because a dog will not. So if you put the racket in front of you to block Penny, she's not going to maneuver around it to try to get you. She does not know that the racket is not a part of you. Okay. She thinks it's an extension of your body, so then she just targets the racket. So if you ever watch Cesar Millan, he will bring a racket with him whenever he works with human aggressive dogs, and you'll always see the dog going at the racket. It never goes around the racket or even jumps up at his arm. It always just goes directly to the closest thing, which is the racket. Okay, so the way we'd work around this is, I would utilize bonker when I can address her when she is not aroused. Okay? And we're going to see what happens. The way it typically happens is, since she's not aroused, we don't see an escalation. Okay? But every case is different. So I would say, when you're going to do this, have something available to you so that you can block and have her go after that. right? Like I have my sleep. I don't know if you
because
guys.
I think of the idea of let's say we know she's going to get aroused. Let's say there's a plate of food on the table, and we're going to try the bonker thing, and I see her tilt her head, and I do the bonker. That's going to create the arousal now versus like I'm creating the arousal. Whereas I think the e-collar, she already knows enough about that where she's like, oh, okay. And then if it's strong enough, and this is a different kind of subject, but when the e-collar is turned up a little bit more, when Ed hits it, she'll hide behind me. Like she comes and hides behind me.
Sure.
Like if it's strong enough. And again, she hid behind me when you kicked her. She came and hid behind me.
Right.
I don't know why me. But I worry that the bonker thing, yes, if I have a tennis racket, like let's go invest in some, go to the thrift shop and buy some cheap tennis rackets right now. But just doing the bonker thing is going to create the arousal. Like, even if I do it before she's aroused.
Yeah, possibly, but we don't know. Okay. Now let's say she does get aroused, right? And she starts moving towards you. That's where the racket or whatever we're going to use to block comes into play because you cannot run. Because she's won so many battles.
Yeah.
You have to make her retreat, right? I tell everybody to make a number of them. Okay? Like not just one, but 3 to 5. And I'm just cycling through them, right? Until like with like you saw with the video, like with considerable force to make her retreat. And then once she retreats, and then you just wait a moment and see how she resolves the issue. She might retreat and sit in the corner and shake and pant. You let her be, okay? Because you can't go over and say it's okay, because then you're going to negate what just happened. Now, because what's going to cause the stress is she's going to go, holy crap. Typically, I win these conversations. But this time, you made me run away and you won the conversation. Okay? And then once you win the first one, everything after that should be easier. Because she's going to relate it to the first time. It's when people start something and then either give up and let the dog win or don't go 100%. So then they just make more work for themselves because now the dog learns, I can outlast you or I can out-aggress you. And you're gonna give it up at the end.
So in my mind, if we want to try the bonker thing, do we do it just for extra safety? Do it while she has a muzzle on top of it?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's what the muzzle's for.
Okay.
Yeah, there's.
It would feel a whole lot better.
Oh yeah, muzzle with the racket for sure. Like I have a dog here that we're doing a board and train, and he's double. He has 2 muzzles. He has a mesh muzzle and a basket muzzle.
Oh.
Just in case.
See, it makes me. Nothing against that dog, but it makes me feel good to know that you work with those kind of dogs too. You know, like there's hope for her.
Yeah, no, it's what's tricky now is COVID is the problem.
Yeah.
But I actually like this because the owners are doing so much more hands-on. Because it doesn't matter if we know how to fix the problem, because when you get her back, she's still going to challenge you. Yeah. So I'm wanting as much as possible you guys resolve it, and then this way it's directly related to you. Where she's like, holy crap, mom and dad can't be pushed around anymore. Okay. So yes, absolutely, you can use that. You can use the muzzle whenever you want to. There is no rule, there is no law about when to use it and how to use it. It's there for safety. By all means, if you want it on her 24/7, you can do 24/7. I've had dogs like that. It just comes down to the owners and how they want to approach things.
And what about e-collar? I mean, it sounds like you're kind of double dipping there, but what about using the e-collar and just having it on? Like, how often should she have it on?
So the only issue I have with the e-collar being on all the time is you're gonna see a shift because like I refer to it as my cop on a collar. When it's present, she's gonna know like, all right, can't get away with stuff. I have to listen, right?
Yeah.
But realistically speaking, we're not going to want to have the e-collar on 24/7. Okay. Now, if that ends up being the answer, and you're like, hey, this is easiest for us, I don't care. But typically within the home, the collar goes away to a degree because you spend most of your time there. Because I'm wanting Penny to see the the family as the authority figures and not just authority figures when they have the e-collar, right? So it's like respecting police officers despite the fact that they don't have a gun and a baton or whatever. They're still police officers. So same thing for Penny. And that's the one. So the pros and cons is with the bonker. The con is it's personal and it could potentially escalate. But the pro is it's because it is confrontational. It's a direct relationship where she's going, crap, mom and dad are handling me themselves. It's not related to the e-collar. The e-collar is great because it's a neutral. The con to e-collar is if there's not enough respect or authority in the dog's head towards the handlers, then when the collar is gone, we may see we're going to see some regression in the behavior. That's why they go kind of hand in hand. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. I think we lost Emily. Parts of her drive home, she goes through like some wooded areas, and it's really sketchy reception. So
sure, yeah, I'll be posting this up hopefully within a day or two.
Yeah, here she is. So I had a situation happen to me. There is a dog in our neighborhood, and I actually got it on video. I can send it to you if you want to see it.
Sure.
So most of the dogs in the neighborhood are very friendly, but there's this one older golden retriever who just sits in his garage, and you don't know he's there. Mm-hmm. And then, here I come walking Penny past the house, and we're 50 yards out or whatever. The dog comes down and starts lurking underneath this one tree at the end of the driveway, like a mountain lion or something. And the dog is totally cued on Penny, and Penny starts noticing the dog and just knows at any second now it's going to be game on,
Right.
And this is the only dog she really does this with. And then, sure enough, the big golden goes and barking and everything, and my dog just starts reacting. And
scary.
Most of the times, she barks, and I calm her down, and that's the end of it. And we just keep marching, walking. Let's ignore this dog. But like the other day, I did it, and she just started pulling like there was no tomorrow. Like she wanted a piece of this dog.
Sure.
Obviously, in that situation, she's all excited. And even if I had a bonker with me, it probably wouldn't make any sense to like whack her with it, or throw it at her head or whatever.
Sure.
But would it have been appropriate for me to use the e-collar?
Yes.
Okay, I have a quick question about that, because normally before we had the e-collar, we would walk Penny with the prong collar. And so I just before we even, you can sense the tension between these two dogs.
Sure.
And I just kind of do the prong collar to get her attention to focus on me, and then talk really happy and say, not a friend, stay with me, everything's good, and we keep walking. But because now you're not using the prong collar when you walk her, the only thing you have is the e-collar to get her attention. And so she can pull because it doesn't hurt to pull.
We just increase the power.
Okay.
So what was her number at, Ed?
It kind of varies from day to day, but probably 40-ish.
Okay. So what I would do, and I can send you some videos on how I handle the reactivity stuff.
Yeah.
But essentially, you just need to override her state of arousal through power.
Okay.
The only concern I'd have is redirect.
Okay.
Because I think it was with your daughter. It was similar, right? Where Penny was ahead of her, and she was trying to get her to come back, and eventually she flipped around and redirected.
Right. She was pulling on her. There's this tie-out that we have in our backyard, and a car came up, and so Penny was going nuts, and our daughter was a few feet behind her, kind of pulling her back. Mm-hmm. That's when the redirect happened.
Correct. So with the e-collar, that can happen as well, because the dog's so frustrated that when it feels something, it'll. I actually saw a video of like a bar fight on YouTube, and it was there like 10 people, like just in a big old scuffle, and you just see people touching people and then just turning around and just punching, because they're just, it's just so crazy, the chaos, that they just assume anybody that touches them is a potential threat. So it's like the same thing for Penny. When she's that escalated, she's not thinking clearly. So when that contraction happens, I always anticipate, just to be a step ahead, that there may be some kind of redirect, especially as you go higher on the collar, because as it gets more uncomfortable, that discomfort has to go somewhere, and it's going to go to the closest thing. So if you're the closest thing, it's going to be you. If the closest thing is the other dog, then it's going to be the other dog. But essentially, we would have to use power to get her to shut down. Okay? And I have a couple of videos that I'll send you that'll show you what it looks like when we shut a dog down using power.
Okay, I guess, the more direct way of asking the question is, what would you do in that situation? You got all the tools at your disposal.
Right. So how far is this dog?
How far from the house?
Oh, when you're like that whole setting there, like what was the distance?
Well, we walk this walk almost every day, so she knows the house like it's before we even get to their property. She knows exactly where the dog is.
Right, but from the distance from where you're at to where the dog is at, I mean, like when you're in the context, right? Where you
maybe it's 100 feet.
Oh wow, from that far away, she's
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
The other dog is very scary.
Yeah, but Jesse, think about this. Our dog knows the neighborhood.
Sure.
She's got all these visual cues. For all we know, it smells a certain way when she gets by this house. And so, like I said, she's locked and loaded. She knows something's about to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So what I would do is when you walk towards the house, and again, you can use your muzzle here because you're if you're going to be proactively addressing something, and we know there's possible redirect. That's an option. Is if you know this happens from 100 feet away, right? As you're approaching the house, look for the first sign of arousal. Okay, and if your number is 40, you can come to a stop, and if you see her ears are perked and her eyes are perked and she's just in an escalated state, I might do a couple of taps on 40, see what she does. If her demeanor doesn't change, I pop it to 50, do a couple of taps, see what she does. If she's still escalated, go to 60, and I keep repeating until eventually you hit a number and she might give a little yip, but then all of a sudden she stops caring about that dog 100 feet away and starts caring about you. Okay? And so you're snapping her out of it before you even get there. And then I go, okay, cool. We're 100 feet away. I've de-escalated you. As you move towards and get closer to that dog, you might see maybe when you approach 20 feet, she triggers again because you're closer. I come to a stop, see what she does. If she's perked up staring at the garage, give a few taps at whatever number you left it at, if it was 70 or whatever. See what she does. Maybe she stops looking at the garage and looks at you and goes, "Sorry, didn't mean to get tense like that." Then I go, "Great." We continue moving, and I'm looking for every little moment of stimulation and just shutting it down before we even get to that driveway. Now, let's say you do all this stuff, and then you get in front of the driveway, and that dog comes out barking. That's a totally different context. Okay, she might reset. But because you've done all this precursor work of keeping her de-escalated, she should be jumping from 0, not jumping from 6. Does that make sense? Because you've taken all the steps to keep her from progressing. But the closer you get to that house, she goes from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3. And eventually she's at 6. And then the dog comes out. Now she's at 10. So if she's at a 0 and the dog comes out, maybe she only jumps to a 4. And it'll take very little. It should only take, theoretically, less power to shut her down at 4 than it would be at 10.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. And in this case, I don't care so much about the obedience. I always, behavior always supersedes obedience. So maybe her heel's a little off, like she's lagging, or maybe she keeps pulling to the opposite side because of the corrections, because she wants to avoid the dog. I let it slide because I don't want any kind of conflict. We always want avoidance when we deal with aggressive responses. So, and she goes, you know what? I see that dog, but instead of staring him down and getting ready for the lunge, I'm just going to like walk over here on the opposite side of you to give distance because I don't want to go into a state of aggression. Okay, so she has to have another option to handle the situation because we have fight, flight, avoidance, submission. She can't run away because she's on a leash. So that really just leaves fight response. So then when you shut down the fight response, then it's either I just accept the fact that I'm going to walk past this dog and it might bark at me, or I avoid it by giving more space so that I'm less uncomfortable when we're in that situation.
Got it.
Other questions?
Have you got anything? You're frozen. Okay, she's frozen. So let's see. I know that we talked. You had asked us, hey, write down a few different behaviors you want to change.
Correct.
We talked about people coming to the door.
Mm-hmm.
If someone comes to our house and let's say she's outside and all of a sudden the car pulls up, she goes into hyper territorial mode.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do in that instance? She's already triggered.
Right.
There's no sense in trying to correct her through anything physical.
Correct. What I would do is if, when we know we're going to have, let's say we're going to have it gets to 5:30.
Mm-hmm.
5 o'clock, she's already collared up and ready to go. Okay. And I might do a quick little walk, 5-10 minute walk, make sure I got that working number, make sure I have contact. When she starts barking, for now, what I'm going to have you do is simply remote, and I have my 3-tap rule, which goes back to earlier with the dog in the driveway, is let's say your number is 40, because that's your working number. And you go tap, tap, tap on 40, and she's unfazed. You bump it to 50. And then tap, tap, tap. No response. I go to 60. Tap, tap, tap. No response. 70. So every 3 taps, if you don't see a response, you're bumping the collar in levels of 10. And the reason why we're doing levels of 10 is so that we get her to shut down quickly. As quickly as possible. Okay? And you'll know when you hit the right number because she might yip out a surprise, but then you'll see her move away from whatever it is she's targeting. So if she's targeting the front door, you'll see her kind of clear out that space, or if she's barking out the window, you'll see her back off of the window. Okay? And right. Let's say she backs off. And once you hit the right number, what you should see, like maybe it's 80 and you give a tap. Right on that first tap, you're going to see a big change in her behavior, where it's going to go from this aggression or aggressive type state to like, holy crap, what was that? Right? Once you achieve that, then I hold off. I don't keep tapping. I hold off and I go, what does that tap achieve? Okay? Because you have to let the brain process the hit. So she's lunging and barking at the door, and you can be across the room. You don't have to be anywhere near her. And you go to 80 and you tap her once and you just see her give a big yip and she runs out of the front door area, and maybe she goes across the room and she sits down and she just looks at the door like, holy crap, what was that? Right? And I go, good. So 1 tap at 80 got her to completely surrender the door, go across the room and go, I want nothing to do with that door right now. Okay? Now, this is simply a Band-Aid for the interim, okay? Because we're tackling this kind of chunk by chunk. And we're going to start with the easiest stuff, which is simply just learning how to stop behaviors, okay? And the next thing would be when you go to approach the door, when I go to open it, what does she do? Okay? And if I go to open it and she's still sitting there, when I corrected her here, she's sitting there like, I want nothing to do with that. And you talk to your guest, hi, how are you? From the threshold of the door, and she's just sitting there like, I don't want nothing to do with that. And you bring your guest in, you're just, every time there's a change, and it's typically, in your case, car drives in the driveway, the door knock, grabbing the handle, opening the door, talking to the guest coming in, those will like be all the triggers. Each time one of those things happens, I'm always looking back at Penny and going, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this? What about this, right? And maybe she's great with everything until the guest comes into the house, right? Like as soon as she sees the guest walking in, you might see her re-trigger. That's not uncommon. So then I just, how'd you say, you're not having your guests come inside entirely. I'd have them step back out again. And I would, if you have a friend who you can coach through it and give them instructions prior and say like, hey, we're going to see when you start to come in how Penny responds. We may need you to immediately walk out so we can close the door so they know that. And when they come in, if she does trigger, your guest steps out, you close the door, and you just tap at 80 and then see what she does. She's maybe she retreats. I don't care where she retreats. I just want her to not charge the door. Then I open the door again, have the guest come in, see how she feels about it. Chances are she's not going to charge again because you corrected her for the charging itself. In this approach, we're not caring how Penny feels about the situation. Okay? We're just caring to learn how to shut down Penny when she's in that state of arousal to that degree. That's what we're trying to figure out here. Okay? There's more to this, but this coming week, and I think we spoke about it briefly at like with the barking at people in the car.
Yeah.
Is I'm just wanting you guys to learn how do we shut down Penny using the e-collar and using the bunker, and what combination of these things are we going to do, and what's effective in certain scenarios and what's ineffective in certain scenarios, so that we can start kind of planning how we're going to approach things going forward. So all we care about learning is shutting her down. I don't care how she feels about it afterwards. I don't care whether or not she's curious about sniffing the guests when they come in. I just want her to not be in that state.
Like the guest. I still want her to eat the guest.
Yeah. And again, muzzle, right? Muzzle and leash.
Yeah.
So you have something to step on if needed or something to grab. And we see what happens. So like in the video where I sent you with me backing or not me, but the owner backing the dog away.
Yeah.
That dog has bitten a few people.
The dog Mia?
Yeah. She's bitten a few people because of territorial mindset. So in that video, we were backing the dog away. There was more conversation. It was more subtle. It wasn't so much about harsh consequence, because we were trying to get her to be in a relaxed state so that we could have guests come over and then get her to socialize with guests and build her trust with people she didn't know. Okay? But that's because it was pre-COVID and I had the ability to do that. Here, I'm just concerned about you learning how to shut down Penny.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back to that as you develop these skills. Okay?
Yeah, I will say my priority is to shut it down. The whole interacting with guests is so low on my priority list at this point.
Sure.
I mean, yes, that would be lovely. I do have a question that's similar to this.
Mm-hmm.
I had purchased before even talking to you or meeting you or even doing this.
Yeah.
Like one of those things that, like, hey, the dog bark thing, if you plug it in, you don't hear it, but the dog will hear it, and they'll stop barking. Great. I plugged it in. Somebody came to the door. Penny barked, flipped out, like, what's that? I don't know what she heard because I don't hear it. She heard something. And then, so this was well over a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
Well over a month ago. Until about 2 days ago, she wouldn't even want to hang out with us on that main level.
Oh, sure.
Because whatever happened there really upset her or bothered her or freaked her out or whatever.
Sure.
And, like last night was the first time, like, wow, she's just sitting and totally relaxed with us, finally. Mm-hmm. Because I unplugged it. I'm like, we're done with that. Because, mm-hmm. You know, she didn't yelp or anything. It just, whatever it was, freaked her out. And I don't want that to happen to the point where she's like freaked out in a corner and now she doesn't want to do anything. Because everything.
With e-collar, though, you can with e-collar, you can force her back in the situation.
Yeah.
So, like, let's say, I correct her and she runs off, but then I want her to go back into the social bubble. And I try to pull her. She goes, nope, I don't want to go in the social bubble. I can use the e-collar and we would lower it to make her move back into the space that she feels uncomfortable in. Okay.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's you can't have both, because that's where things get really complicated. Where it's like, I want to work with the dog and their aggressive behavior, but at the same time, I don't want to spook them so much that they don't want to interact.
Yeah.
Then you're making things super even for me, I go like, this is too complicated, because it becomes so nuanced, right?
Yeah.
So in the beginning, all I care about is just don't attack people. I don't care what you do, just don't attack people, okay? When they come over.
Don't bite anybody. That's right.
And then we will worry about how she feels, okay? So it's more like we do one topic, then we do the next topic. My goal is that you can have people come over, Penny opens up, and she's not a jerk, okay? It doesn't always happen that way, but that's always the goal. And then we see how far along we can get. But definitely stopping the behavior, you have to put aside for now how Penny feels or what she does in that situation.
Okay.
Questions? For this week, your homework is pick the situations you want to push. If someone can just simply come and ring the doorbell to make Penny go crazy, they don't have to come. They're not coming in. They're just ringing the doorbell, doing whatever to trigger the behavior, so that you can just practice stopping it, and then they would leave. Is one thing. Just learning how to stop it, and then learning her numbers and whatever, and then seeing what's her response when she's corrected. Whenever you do correct her, like let's say she does hide behind you, Emily, is you just ignore her.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
Just ignore her. Don't try to console her, or don't try to because the excited voice that you were talking about earlier stimulates the brain, and it just, you're putting her back into that mental state where she can simply trigger again. And we always want the dog to be in a calm, passive state as much as possible, unless the situation requires her to be excited. Like let's say you're playing fetch or something. Like I don't care there, but I want her to be to be calm, okay? Because it'll negate the correction if you try to console her or use like happy voice or anything like that. Like when I got spanked as a kid, my mom didn't come back in my room like, "Hey, come on," like it was just like, don't do that if you don't want to get spanked. All right. So don't worry about people coming in quite yet. Let's just worry about stopping her crazy behavior at the door when Amazon comes, when UPS comes. If you have a friend that can just ring the doorbell, whatever, or maybe have her upstairs and one of you guys goes and rings the doorbell. I know some clients have doorbells that they can ring from their phone, and just doing that a few times a day to kind of get a feel for where she's at when you do these things. The next one would be if you want to create the situation of leaving food out, right? But remember, if you're going to do this stuff, if you think at 5:30 I'm going to leave my bowl out, then at 5 o'clock she's muzzled up, she's collared up, she's got a leash on, and then and that you wouldn't correct high. You would correct that lower. And again, I start at working number, so if that's 40, then I'd be at 40. And don't say anything. You're just correcting the thought of the act itself, not the actual act. Okay. Ideally, you want to approach this prior till she does that. If she does go to the bowl and you're like, "Oh crap, I'm late," and you're like, "I want to see what happens," then feel free to, because she's muzzled. But you have to be ready to shut it down completely.
Because I was watching your video you posted, I think on Instagram, you were trying to take a picture, I guess, and there were two dogs.
Yep.
And you're like, crap, I missed it. I missed the look. I missed it. And then they went after each other. And I'm like, that's where I feel like I am. Like, oh, I missed it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to happen. Like, I've had plenty of shit hits the fan moments, but in that video, we recover from it. The owner.
they were muzzled, and everybody seemed pretty calm about it.
Yeah, because they're all dealing with the same issue.
Yeah.
So
I was like, wow, you guys are all calm. I'd be freaking out right now.
Yeah, but you're looking like all of those clients are clients with at least 4 to 5 classes, if not more, under their belt. And that's why when we go into these situations, I tell people, force yourself into those situations because it's controlled. It's going to happen. You're not going to ideally not freak out. It's when it happens organically is when people panic. But since they put themselves in the situation so many times in a controlled context, when it happened seemingly out of nowhere, they had done it so many times that they already jumped into this is how we address it. And so it's like practicing a fire escape plan, hoping it never happens, and then one day it happens, and you don't panic. You have a game plan, and you're going through that. You're going through those motions of like these are the steps. It's the same thing with dog training.
So should we not do the bonker thing yet?
No, I would do the bonker as well.
Okay.
Now, if you wanna isolate and do e-collar for a week to kind of soften her up and then incorporate the bonker, I think you could. I mean, that's fine too.
Okay.
Get some already.
I always hate kind of like, okay, we're gonna train right now, and then like overstimulate her. Like to me, it's like little batches. Like we just stimulated you on purpose. Now, it just all of a sudden started raining and the sky's bright blue above me. I don't want to overstimulate her to the point you get to that point where it's like we're not even getting anything accomplished anymore because she's between the e-collar and the bonker and she's like
Well, it's not that you're not gonna. It's not that you're overstimulating her too much. It's that the owners have a hard time applying a firm enough correction to just shut it down.
Yeah.
I mean, the incident here at the facility, I'm assuming that that's the worst it could be, right? Because she actively charged at me and was snapping, right?
Yeah.
And I shut it down. But I've done this several times. Lord knows how many times I've done this over the course of 10 years. That I know I'm going to get it done, right? But it's getting the owners to that degree of we know we're going to get it done and we will go to the extents needed to get it done. That's the difference here. My mindset is let me do what I got to do and I'll take care of it. Whereas most clients are they're unsure because they're afraid of making things worse. But that's where these tools come into effect, and that's why I was like use your muzzle, use a leash, get a racket, get some bonkers, get your e-collar. You got your little arsenal of tools there, so that if things go south, you can ride the situation through and shut it down.
Yeah, I will say we did brush her the other day. We had her muzzle on. I don't think we had her e-collar on. She's pretty good, but again, it's she needs hours of brushing. But after about 20 minutes, that tenseness of me brushing her, she finally kind of will hit a wall enough already. So I just know if I can get 20 minutes brushing and then I'm done, that helped me. And she was wearing the muzzle and jacked away, moved around. It's more positive experience. Did we have the e-collar on her, Ed? I can't remember.
I don't think so. I think it was just the muzzle.
I just felt more safer, actually, just having the muzzle on her because, she can be just finding that signal. You say, kind of look for their ears and kind of look for, it's hard when you're also, grooming her, so I didn't want to.
Yeah, you're still learning all these things. So as you go along and make, you get successes, your confidence will go up.
And it was fine. Yeah.
So for this week, because we got a few minutes here, for your homework, again, the doorbell thing, don't worry about the person coming in, just shutting down that behavior using the e-collar. If you want to create those food situations, starting at your your working number, 40 or whatever, If you want to refrain from the bonker for a week to kind of just see, soften her up with discipline with the e-collar, that's fine. Any other situation that you feel like, let's say like in the yard, like dogs will like bark along the fence or whatever, like that as well. Like you can shut that down. You don't even have to be in the yard. You could be inside watching her from the window. I just want you to learn numbers. Just learn what it looks like when she's completely passive after a good correction. And then we're going to start making things a bit more complicated by like, adding, like the door exercise, adding in the bonker. Then we have the driveway situation with that dog as well. And by all means, I always suggest that people err on the side of caution and utilize that muzzle. Don't feel like just because it hasn't happened that it won't happen, because I've had clients think that and then they get bit. Any questions for me?
No, at some point I would love the name of your groomer.
Oh, yeah. I'll email that to you.
That you can handle. I want to, I'm fine doing it now, but at some point she's going to need like the full on, and that's too much for me.
Yeah. If you guys ever drop her off here again, we take them sometimes during boarding and daycare or whatever. During the day, we'll drop them off over there and they'll groom them, and then we go and pick them up.
Okay, good.
Otherwise, I'll send you the info as well if you want to drop her off. I would say definitely want to get some more classes in before we go there. And then I would hold off on planning any in-person stuff. We'll give it a week. We'll see how this progresses. The next Zoom lesson, if everything's going well, we're going to make it a bit more complicated and push things a bit more, add some more nuance, like, flushing her back or whatever. And then we'll see how that goes. And then from there, it will dictate how we move forward.
Okay. So, Jesse, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You worked with probably a lot of Australian Shepherds over the last however many years.
Yeah.
And it's becoming probably a little bit more popular of a breed.
Yes. I've seen like 8 puppies, like just driving around in the city and seeing people with them.
Yeah. And the thing is, I would really discourage people from getting this breed of dog.
A little PSA.
I mean, because I love the breed.
Yeah.
I love the breed. And it's just like, a border collie is not really suited to city life. And these dogs are obviously pretty bright, and they're really willful, and they need to have something to do all the time because they'll figure out something to do if they're not directed. What my concern is that someone gets an Australian Shepherd and the dog is too much for them to handle, because frankly they take at least 3 or 4 years to kind of calm down and grow up. At least that's been our experience. We've had 3 Aussies over 25 years. Penny's our third.
6 years.
20,
Just say it.
26 years.
No, 6 years it takes for them to calm down.
Oh yeah, okay.
They get super chill.
I'm like 26 years. Geez, we haven't been married 26 years. Did I miss an anniversary there? I'm so screwed. But anyways, so my thing is, and there's a girl, I forget her name, but she does this thing with Aussies, and she's great. And she talks about the breed and what to expect. And she has this really impassioned plea. This is all up on YouTube. And she's like, if you're thinking of getting an Australian Shepherd, please understand what you're in for. Mm-hmm. Because it's not easy. They look cute and everything, and they're, they can do tricks and frisbee and stuff. But they take a lot of instruction and a lot of work to get them to be good house dogs. Mm-hmm. And I think that if somebody's living like in a condo or an apartment or whatever, and they're in the city, and they can't get their dog out and do stuff with them, it's just going to end up, that dog's going to end up either being a rescue or going to the pound or something. And,
sure.
And I really worry about this with the popularity of the breed.
No, I mean, it's with a lot of dogs, a lot of breeds, because people go for looks and not for, temperaments or, just their lifestyle. Pitties or pit bulls is a very common one.
Sure.
I had a couple a few years ago that got a Rottweiler just because they liked the look of a Rottweiler, and they ended up with a Rottweiler with behavioral issues. And they were the wife was completely against e-collar, and I was like, man, you guys are in for a really rough life with this dog if you're not comfortable with e-collar, the dog was only a puppy. The dog was only 4 to 5 months, and I could already see he was not a stable dog. I don't know whatever happened with them because they didn't train with me. But unfortunately, with humans, because in my opinion, humans are the problem, not the dogs. We created them through breeding and stuff. Is that people don't think about these things? You know, that they do impulsive buys. They go, oh, the dog's so cute, and they don't think about the lifestyle and whether or not their lifestyle fits or coincides with that dog's needs or what have you. Or they get a dog that needs a specific type or style of training, and then they're not comfortable with that style of training, so then they end up having issues with the dog because of that. So I completely agree with you, Ed. Like it is what it is, and it's partially why I have a job. So.
Yeah. Well, so you're not on Facebook, are you?
I am on my business.
You are, okay. So you maybe as a public service you could do a couple sessions on these are ideal dogs for city dwellers, and if you're thinking about getting these 8 dogs, please take these things into consideration.
Sure, yeah.
You don't want to get like a Belgian Tavern and have it in a small space or whatever. There's a neighbor of ours had they were babysitting a Belgian sheepdog. The big black dogs with big bad ears.
Sure.
Coolest looking dog. Emily hates them.
Hey, now.
Like the big bad wolf. They're the greatest looking dogs. They're so cool. They're like this scariest, badass looking dog. Anyways, that's like a police dog or something. I don't know. So that would be my suggestion. Hey, do this, and I'll share it with all my friends. If you're gonna get the dog,
Yeah, no, we've been working on a lot of content stuff. I just wrote it down. That's a good, it's definitely a good topic. And it's been covered before, but there's so many people in the world and people that will just do what they want.
Quit making everything a doodle. Quit making everything a doodle.
Yeah, that's another one. That's another PSA.
Stop with the doodle.
I have to head out, guys. I have a client.
Okay, all right, cool. Thank you.
If you have any questions, shoot me an email. And then otherwise, I'm going to follow up with you later tonight with a few videos, and then, of course, the info for the breeder, okay? For the groomer.
Excellent. Thanks much, Justin.
You're welcome. Good luck, guys.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
All right, bye-bye.